Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Jane, for inviting me. So this is a very new work that I've been doing for the past couple of months, and this is called Bitcoin wash trading. And this is joint work with Arash Alush. So let me just jumpstart into it. So what is wash trading? Wash trading is a type of market manipulation. So we think about it in exchange. And wash trading basically is traders trade with themselves, right? So that's what we say, the same trader clear one's own outstanding limit orders. So by trading with oneself, wash trading allows traders to basically cook fake transaction records. And because if you ever trade on an exchange, you will realize that you cannot really know who's trading with whom. You only know that, okay, a certain transaction has happened. So for market participants, they are not able to distinguish between a genuine trade and a wash trade. That creates an illusion of active trading and inflated volume on exchanges. So wash trading as a market phenomenon is not really talked a lot in the finance literature. And this is because in traditional regulated financial markets, wash trading is like explicitly banned, right? So if you go to stock exchanges, futures market, the commodity market, you typically don't see large scale wash trading happen because it can just not happen. However, a lot of people argue that wash trading could be a very prevalent phenomenon in crypto markets. And indeed, actually, some data providers now they present the so-called adjusted trading volume because they claim that the trading volumes are kind of wrong. So, as far as I know, the first evidence or the first piece that people have been pointing out this particular fake volume or wash trading volume in the crypto space is a Medium post by Sylvan Ribe, who is a trader himself. And what he did is he looked at the relationship across multiple crypto exchanges and looked at the relationship between the slippage, that is like how much premium you have to pay when you buy Bitcoin for a large size, versus the reported trading volume. And intuitively, you would expect that if an exchange have a very high volume, then the slippage would be low, right? If the volume is high, that means the liquidity of the market is good. That means the slippage should be relatively small. However, he identified that, well, some exchanges actually seems to have very, very extremely high volume, abnormal volume compared to its slippage. So he makes this such argument that these exchanges are suspected to be inflating the volume in large, potentially by doing so-called wash trading. And another piece of evidence is probably one of the most famous in the industry, in the community, is a presentation made by Bitwise Asset Management to the SEC last year, in which they look at the order book across different exchanges and use some statistical tools and argue that 95% of all cryptocurrency exchange volumes are fake. Right? So this is an eye-popping number. Whether you believe their technology or not, that's another story. However, I mean, this is a very famous piece of argument. So understanding to what extent wash trading plagues the cryptocurrency market is important because it has a lot of practical implications. On one hand, the SEC has, if you've been following the market, you'll notice that the SEC has been rejecting the so-called Bitcoin ETF proposals. Numerous Bitcoin ETF proposals has been rejected by the SEC. And one of the reasons the SEC does so is by citing that the Bitcoin price is very large, is very subject to manipulation because the volume is thin. And their argument of the volume being thin actually cites some of the arguments that put forward in the community that even though we do see high reported trading volume, but a lot of them actually just are fake. Right? So that also leads to some of the discussions or the debates between cryptocurrency exchanges and regulators regarding whether the crypto exchanges should be subject to more strict regulations, right? Oops. So, by the way, I want to emphasize that this first piece of evidence or suggestion or suspicion about wash trading in the crypto space was in 2018. Okay, and this presentation to the SEC was back in 2019, last year. Okay, so it gives the impression that crypto wash trading is a relatively recent phenomenon in the crypto space. However, we know that crypto trading has been in existence for years. So it's kind of interesting to know, okay, maybe in the early days of crypto trading, whether wash tradings are also present. So in this paper, we are actually going to look into the very first crypto exchange, which is Mt. Gox. And we would like to see whether there are wash trading within the Mt. Gox exchange. The Mt. Gox operates back in 2011 until 2010 until 2013. So it's kind of interesting to understand what happens in the past. And also something that is of interest to us is that despite all the evidence, right, all the evidence provided here, all the evidence are based on statistical inference, right? They're all kind of indirect inference. So we don't really have any direct evidence about whether wash trading are actually happening. Even if we accept the fact that some of the trading volumes are inflated, we don't really know whether they're necessarily fit for wash trading or not. So also, there are a lot of other questions that we are interested in. For example, who actually conducts those wash trading, right? Specifically, whether it is just traders for whatever reason they want to do wash trading, or it is actually the exchange insiders themselves committing wash trading, try to inflate the exchange volume. And also, I want to understand why they do wash trading, right? Do they do wash trading because they want to manipulate the Bitcoin price, or they simply just want to inflate the volume so that maybe they will create an illusion of a very liquid market so as to attract a lot more people. So, and also we would be interested in to know, like, when do wash trading happen, right? Is wash trading a recent phenomenon that is like has been pointed out since 2018, or actually it's an original sin of crypto exchanges? And also want to understand under what market conditions do wash trading actually occur? And also, what are the market impacts of wash trading, right? That is related to why people want to do wash trading. Eventually, if we can have some direct evidence, then we can also evaluate whether some of those indirect inferences provided in the literature are actually accurate. Right? So all these questions are of our natural interest. However, we will only be able to answer these questions if we have some direct evidence, rather than just simply relying on statistical inference. So this is what our paper does, right? We look into a direct internal trading record of Mt. Gox, and we find the following. We find that at least 2% and up to 33% of all the trading volume on Mt. Gox were actually wash trades, right? So why we have such a large region? Because I will show you that we define wash trading using different criteria. Okay? So that's why we provide direct evidence of the widely suspected fake volume allegation. Right? People think that there are fake volume. They provide a lot of evidence suggesting that we show that this is indeed true. Okay? And also we show that exchange insiders are involved in those wash trading. So, and they do not seem to mainly to manipulate the price. They're not trying to use wash trading to push up the Bitcoin price. As a matter of fact, we actually show that when they do wash trading, the subsequent Bitcoin return actually tends to be negative. However, what we really see is that the wash trades do inflate the apparent trading volume subsequently in the next day. And that boosts the commissions or the fees collected through the exchanges from all the deceived customers. Right? So all this evidence seems to be consistent with what people in the community has been suspecting. Right? Eventually, we also evaluate some indirect inference techniques proposed in the literature. Okay. So this is a preview of the results in case I run out of time. this is basically what I will show you throughout this talk, just in more detail. All right, I'm going to skip the related literature. So let's look at the data. The data we use is all individual transaction records on Mt. Gox, right? So for anyone who's been familiar with Bitcoin, you know that Mt. Gox is widely regarded as the first Bitcoin exchange. And also throughout most of its, throughout most of our sample, it actually is the only Bitcoin exchange. By the later part of the sample, there are some new entrants entering into this market, but still the Mt. Gox is always a major crypto exchange. And this exchange collapsed back in early 2014. And upon its collapse, right, the hackers actually hacked into Mt. Gox's internal system, and they get the data, get all the internal trading records. And this is basically the data that we use. Okay. And what does Mt. Gox do? Right, Mt. Gox facilitates fiat to Bitcoin conversion. So the traders can just deposit various fiat currencies, right, like USD, Japan yen. I will show that they actually support 17 different type of fiat currencies. You can deposit various cryptocurrency, fiat currencies, right, in order to purchase Bitcoin. And whenever you purchase Bitcoin, the Mt. Gox will collect some commissions in Bitcoin, which we will call Bitcoin fee. Okay? And then you can also deposit Bitcoin rather than depositing money. Deposit Bitcoin into the exchange and then sell it for various cryptocurrencies of your choice. And then whenever you sell Bitcoin and collect fiat currencies, the Mt. Gox will collect some commissions, which we call fiat or money fee. Okay? And this exchange was headquartered in Japan and serving a global customer base, right? So actually like more than 160 countries. And it supports 17 fiat currencies, and Japanese yen is the internal unit of count, right? Because it's headquartered in Japan. The CEO actually lives in Japan. Okay, so just to give you a sense, we are really like about our sample period, right? So we are really looking at. It almost feels like when you analyze the Mt. Gox data in the Bitcoin community, it almost feel like you're doing some prehistoric anthropology, right? So this here, what I plot is the Bitcoin price, right? We know that this very famous 2017, 2018 Bitcoin bubble, right? This is Bitcoin price. I think if I include a little bit here, the price will be also going up, right? So this is almost like the entire sample of the entire history of Bitcoin prices. And this shaded area is our sample, okay? So we are really looking at the very early days of Bitcoin. And specifically, it's from April the 4th, 2011 to November the 30th, 2013. And as I said, Mt. Gox is a major crypto exchange back in that time. So what we plot here is the market share of Mt. Gox in terms of trading volume, right? So this we see that, right? So for the first half of the sample, Mt. Gox is like a monopoly. It's the only crypto exchange. And then later in the sample, there are a lot of other exchanges that enter into the market, famously Bitstamp and BitBTCE that enter into this market that eats away some of the market shares, right? But we see that for most of our sample, right, here is like 60%, right? So this shaded area is our sample. Throughout our sample, right, the market share is always going to be above 60%. So we are really looking at a very large market. So also famously, you may notice that here is a sudden drop here, back in here, right? So like it just falls from 100% to 0%, and then just go back again. So this actually, there is 1 week. There was a week in our sample in the history of Mt. Gox. And Mt. Gox actually went down. The site just got hacked. So you see that actually the site got hacked a lot. So the site got hacked. So there was 1 week during which the Mt. Gox did not function. So that's why the market share dropped to 1%. So our sample will start from when the Our sample will start from when the exchange went back online, and also will end until the May 2013. This is when I will show you why. This is a time when the Mt. Gox got investigated by the Department of Homeland Security in the United States for a litigation it has with its U.S. subsidiary. Okay. So this shaded area is our sample. All right, so just very quickly, right? So the Mt. Gox, the interface just looks like a very regular exchange, and you can buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin, and when you buy Bitcoin, you'll pay Bitcoin fee. When you sell Bitcoin for fiat, you'll pay fiat money, which we call money fee or fiat fee. Right? Why we want to emphasize the fee? Because these fees are a major source of revenue to the exchange, which is also going to be one variable that we're going to study later. This is a notice that Mt. Gox put forward back in 2014 when the exchange went bankrupt, got collapsed. Of course, initially people don't know what's going on with Mt. Gox. All they know is that they got a notice that, okay, the exchange is just stopping to provide service. So later on, they realized that actually there was something really bad happening at the exchange, and the exchange went down in February 2014. All right, so here just a recall of our sample, right? This is again the history of the entire history of Bitcoin price movement, and this is our sample. Now, if let's zoom in this shaded area, and let's look at this particular area. Okay, so as I said. So that now if we look into this area, we know that, okay, right, the Bitcoin price was relatively stable throughout most of the sample until in 2013, it began to spike and then just went down. And then there was also a sort of called bubble that is in Bitcoin prices back in 2013. And this peak was also the time when Mt. Gox basically went bust. Right? The fact that, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell which causes what, but the collapse of the Bitcoin price and the collapse of the Mt. Gox exchange happens roughly around the same time. And all these red lines are going to be some major events that happens throughout the Mt. Gox history, which I'm going to give you more detail in the next slide. All right. So here are some of the major events that goes into Mt. Gox. So late in 2002, the Mt. Gox was actually created. This exchange was actually created in 2017. That's even 2007, right? That's even before when Bitcoin went into life. Right? This is because this exchange was first developed not to trade Bitcoin. Was actually this Jet McCaleb. You may know this guy, right? He famously founded Ripple, and this guy, he created a trading platform for a card game. The card game is called Magic: The Gathering Online. So if you just take the initials, that gives you the kind of weird name called Mt. Gox. Right? This Mt. Gox was a trading place for card games initially, and then back in 2010, Mt. Gox started to quoting Bitcoin prices, right? And then the popularity of this exchange just skyrocketed. And then around the end of 2010, Marc Carpelet, and he's French, so maybe we should say Carpelet. Marc Carpelet bought 88% share of the Mt. Gox, and so from McCaleb, and began to serve as the CEO. Right. So throughout this guy will be the CEO, and also will be the so-called insiders. We'll show that, or we'll give some evidence to show that, well, he seems to be kind of involved in some of the wash trading that happens on Mt. Gox. Right? So our sample then starts in 2011, April the 4th. And as I said, in June 2011, there was a hack to Mt. Gox exchange. So the site went offline for about a week. So when the site went back online after that weeks of stop service, this is going to be the start of our sample. And then back in May 2013, the Department of Homeland Security begins to invest in Mt. Gox for a litigation, and that is going to be an end of our sample. Okay. And then there's this full, then our full sample ends on November the 30th. And then later on, there are some other events, which is not going to be of direct interest to our study, although it will be of interest to anyone who's just kind of curious about what's actually going on with Mongox. So just to kind of fix notation a little bit, this date, the time between this date and this date, which we'll later call our full sample, and the time period between this date and this date, we'll later on call it a subsample. And I'm going to give you a reason why we call it full sample or subsamples. In short, basically is that the full sample are all the dates in which we do have records, we have data. And this sub period is a time when we can observe wash trading. So wash trading did not happen before this date or after this date. So it really is something, it almost feels like the Mongox got hacked, and so they went back online, and during this process of fixing the exchange, we began to see wash trading begin to creep into this market. And also, we suspect that because the US regulators began to investigate Mongox after this date, so they no longer conduct wash trading, maybe partly just because they are under more careful monitoring, or there could be other reasons. But basically, this is our sample period during which there are wash trading. So this is just this guy, Mark Harpless. We can actually go on Twitter and, well, maybe we're in Beijing, we can not use Twitter. But if you can go on Twitter and you can actually still find Mark Harpless. And just pay attention to, right, his handle is called Magical Tux. This handle is going to show up later too, right? So this is eventually we will be able to identify one of the trader who's named Magical Tux, and when we make our best guess to link to the insider of the exchange. Okay, so just to kind of illustrate a little bit about this hack in 2011, I said there's 1 week during which Mongox, all the trading records, just the site went down, so you cannot trade. So what we plot here is the timeline, and this is and here is the log of the order size in terms of Bitcoin. So here you can see a lot of different dots, right? Basically, this chart is just full of dots. Each dot is one single trade, okay? And its order size, the size of each trade, take the log, is going to be plotted here, okay? So we can see that, right? So throughout this sample period, there are a lot of trades, but there are just 1 week during which there are just no trade at all, and this is because of the hack. Okay, so just a little bit more about the data. So the original data file we have comes in three forms. So we're gonna be basically just like the hackers hack into the internal server of Mongox, and we get a zip file. And the zip file contains multiple files, which we call basically trade files. Right? They basically document all the transactions and up to the individual trader ID level. And there are also the other two records. One is called balance, and one is called transfer. So for most of our analysis, we'll just be using this particular type of files, which is called a trade file. Although we will use some information from the balance file and the transfer files for identifying some of the exchange insiders. Okay, just to give you some visualization about the files, the raw data. I don't know how well you can read into this. So this is the trade file, just give you a very small sample of the trade file. So here are each trade where I have the trade ID. We have the date and time of which when the trade happened. And we also here, this is important, we have this so-called user ID. So we do know, right, who's actually trading, who's actually behind each trade, each transaction. So we only know this trader ID. So for example, if you can see here, we have trader ID number 1, we have trader ID 634. We don't really know, right? What's the name of this trader ID, and we don't know like whether this is a guy or a girl, or we don't know that type of information. And we know like we know that whether it's in Japan or not, whether it's a buy order, whether the transaction is buy or it's a sell, and the currency that it used, and amount of Bitcoin that is involved, and amount of fiat currency that are involved. Okay? And also for space limitations, there's two important data field which we didn't enter here, which one is called user country, another is called user state. So for a lot of our sample, we actually know where does this trader come from. Right? Of course, you can say some of the information may be obfuscated because if you use VPN, then maybe it's hard to tell. Right? But at least it gives a noisy measure about the breakdown of the countries. Right? And also important that for the user and the user countries and the user state, most of the users, if they are verified, so actually the Mongox provides this. You can just register account. You can just open an account on the exchange just using an email. Right? It's very easy. You don't have to. Again, this is very early days of Bitcoin trading, so the concept of KYC is not that prevalent. So you can just create an account on Mongox, and if you just create an account, then of course, right, there's no way for the exchange to know which country you're coming from. So then this country field will just be empty. Right? You can also alternatively choose to verify yourself with the exchange, and if you do so, then there will be a country code that is given to all the verified users. And if users fail verification, then they will have a double exclamation mark as their country code. And there's also going to be very tiny number of users that have double question marks in their user IDs. And these are anomalies, which actually also going to be useful for us to detect some of the insiders. Okay? So here's just an illustration of the original balance file and the original transfer files. I'm going to skip these two. This is, again, just the original trade files. If you can read them, actually, we can show that we can actually directly show wash trading happening. Right? So here we can see, for example, this guy, 634 and 634, right? Right at the same time, this trade buys 2 Bitcoins, and this one sells 2 Bitcoins, and for the same price, right? So this is a very direct evidence of wash trading, because you just can see in your plain eyes that there's this single user trade ID that is just at the same time buying the same amount of Bitcoin and at the same time selling the same amount of Bitcoin, right? You're just basically exchanging Bitcoin from your left hand to your right hand, right? So this is how we directly document a wash trading. So I'm going to skip this. So there's going to be some very standard data cleaning. Eventually, that lead to our sample. Here are some summary statistics where we can show what is the mean order size, mean price, and the mean Bitcoin fee that are being paid. And we can also break down the sample across different countries. We know that, right, a lot of traders are verified, so we do have trader information, country information, and we see that actually most of the wash trade actually is in US dollars, but that's also because US dollars is just the most prevalent. Although Mongox is headquartered in Japan, 36% of the transaction volume actually comes from the United States. And also we can break down by currencies, and we can see that US dollar is even more dominant, right? The US dollar is a global currency. So even if you're outside of the US, you still want to use US dollars. So all the transactions, right, it's 87% of the transaction volume actually are conducted in USD. All right. So now let's look at how prevalent is wash trading. So in order to define wash trading, we have to be a little bit more careful, right? Because the one feature of our data is that we know each user ID behind each transaction. However, because there's no KYC that is mandatory required for traders, so there's nothing that prevents you from opening multiple accounts. You can just have two different emails, and you can just open two different accounts and have two different user IDs on Mongox, even though you're just controlling two of them. So, in order to define wash trading, so we have to use different assumptions. How do we treat user IDs that are different that may potentially belong to the same person? So a lot of what we do in the paper is actually making that straight. So the first thing we can do is we define a very narrow definition for wash trading, which we call direct wash trades. So that is just that we only regard transactions in which the buy side and the sell side have the same trader ID, the same time, the same price, and the same size as a wash trade. And these type of direct wash trades, there are this number of them, and they involve about 2,800 user IDs. So apparently, this is going to be an underestimation about wash trading. So we can also try to use a more broad definition. So what do? Since we have identified these user IDs, so we may say, okay, these user IDs we have evidence that they are involved in wash trading, and we know that for sure. So maybe all they do is wash trade. So we can look at all the transactions among these 2,887 wash trader user IDs. And if we define all the transactions among them as wash trades, which we call indirect wash trades, then we will have this number of so-called indirect wash trades. Apparently, this is going to be an overestimate, right? However, using these two methods, we can at least have a region about what is the lower bound and what is the upper bound about potential wash trades. And later on in the paper, we're going to actually analyze a series of different definitions that straddle between the lower bound and the upper bound, right? So, so just to give you a sense, here we plot the total trading volume day by day on Mongox versus the total indirect wash trade. Right? So if you can, this is what we can show here. And if we look at the percentage, then we can see that this indirect wash trade is roughly about like 30% of the trading volume. So this is actually pretty large. So if you look at the data here, let's just look at the subsample. If we have all the direct, indirect wash trades, that is going to count for 32.8%. This is like in the beginning when I said that up to 33% of all the trading volume are potentially wash trades. And if we only look at the direct wash trades, remember this is going to be an underestimate, then we can say, well at least we know at least 2.1% of all the trading volume are for sure wash trades. All right, so I think I have another 6 minutes. So I'm going to be very quick on the remainder of the paper. So basically I want to just give you some quick overview about how do we look at who commits wash trading and what are the consequences of wash trading, okay? So effectively what we do is that if we want to understand who commits wash trading, so we know that there are 2,000, this number of wash trader IDs, then we just want to have some additional information about who they are, right? This is basically what we're going to do here. And in order to do that, we have to rely on some additional information, as we said. The data itself does not tell us, who are behind these different trader user IDs. So there is a very famous document in the Bitcoin community, which is called the Willy Report. I'm going to skip the details here, but essentially what this report does is that they also look into this leaked data, and this guy did a very careful and convincing analysis about some of the users' IDs that are involved. So specifically, this report, this blog basically identifies someone called Willy. The way he does this is basically to detect that the Willy has some very anomalous trading behaviors that are widely discussed in the Bitcoin community, even before the availability of this data set. So he knows the pattern of this so-called Willy bot, and he looked into this data and single all these trader IDs out. So the first part of our our analysis is actually going to be using this so-called identified Willy. And then there's another insider, which is called Marcus. I'm going to skip the details about how they define Marcus, but just the short answer is that, well, this document looked into the linkage between just the comparison, the patterns of some trades with the trades of Willy, and identify some guy who's called Marcus. And thirdly, they identify someone who's called Magical Tux. And remember, again, Magical Tux is the handle on Twitter of the CEO of Mongox, right? So they identify these IDs. So they can use all these IDs to argue that, well, these trader IDs are definitely the exchange insiders. Furthermore, because most of the user IDs are created in a chronicle order. So you can imagine that number one, right, the very first trader IDs are likely to be, even if he's not the exchange insider, he must be closely related to the exchange insider, right? So we define these trader IDs as known insiders. And based on that, we can also define some other type of traders, right? Those who never pay any fees, so have some super privilege over other traders, right? We identify them maybe potentially insiders. And there's some so-called hijackers, and there's some people called double users. I'm going to skip the details. And also, and this part uses some of the balance file and the transfer file we called before, those IDs that don't have any user wallets, or they have empty user fields. And so then we can identify this different set of insiders. And here are some summary statistics of these different insiders. So you can go down from the list is basically just like we are being more inclusive, but also being less confident about their status of insiders. Okay? And these are the insiders. And then we can look into all the transactions done by these insiders. Okay? And then we can define different so-called different groups. Okay? And you can think about essentially what we're doing is we're defining an ever-increasing set of transactions. In the G0 set, the group 0, you can think about is the direct wash trades, is just the most narrow defined type of wash trades. And the GA is like this group all is like all the transactions among the wash trader IDs. And we can think about this is essentially is what we have called before as indirect wash traders. Indirect wash trades. And all these different groups within specifies different types of a series of sets of transactions that are likely to be involved by insiders. So we can provide some summary statistics for these. But in the last remaining 1 minute, what I want to show you is, okay, after we have defined all these different sets, what can we show from the, what we know from the consequence of these guys doing wash trading? So what we know, right? It's widely believed that in the Bitcoin community, it's widely believed that the exchanges are involved in doing wash trading, and their goal is to pump up the volume, right? So that the exchange will look more attractive to others. And if the exchange look more attractive to other traders, then maybe more traders will come into this market, and that is probably gonna increase the fees collected by the exchange itself. So then we will be interested in, right, how would wash trading affect subsequent Bitcoin prices, and how would that market condition, and how would that affect the total fees collected by the Mt. Gox. So in short, what we are interested in is the joint dynamics among wash trading, Bitcoin prices, and fees collected by the exchange. And in order to conduct that analysis, we have to look, and we just use a so-called vector autoregression. So what we do here is that we're going to have it here is just a VAR and specification. So all the y's here is YT is a 3 times 1 vector that correspond to wash trading volume, Bitcoin fees collected, and Bitcoin price. And all variables are stationarized by taking day-to-day percentage changes. You can think about the growth of the trading volume, the growth of fees collected, and this is just Bitcoin return, right? And every day. So if we estimate this VAR regression, and we can look at the impulse response functions. The impulse response function, I want to draw your attention here. This impulse response functions looks at, like, when we shock the wash trading volume, then in subsequent days, how does it affect the Bitcoin fees that are collected, right? So if we define wash trades as this direct wash trades, then this is what you see, right? It looks a little bit positive, and it looks a bit positive, but it's not that significant. But if we look at all the other different groups, we can see, well, right, you can see very clearly the next day, the trading volume, the fees collected by the exchange will go up and significantly go up, right? And this is robust when just we change different group definitions, right? It only becomes insignificant again when we go to the all wash trades. But that's probably just because, right? And when we become too inclusive, then there's just too much noise. However, the pattern, right? We can still see that everything is positive. Okay. And I think I'm out of time, so I'm gonna skip the last point. And I think this is all I want to say. And so in summary, what we do in this paper, we use the data from Mt. Gox, and we document some direct evidence of Bitcoin wash trading. Right? And back in the very early days of Bitcoin trading. And we find that the exchange insiders are involved in these kind of market manipulations. And they probably the reason why they want to do it is because doing wash trading is going to significantly boost the fees collected by the exchange. So all the direct evidence seems to be consistent with what people have been talking in the community, that exchange fixed volume so that to attract others and for their own purpose, for their own benefits. And I think that's all I want to say. So thanks for your attention.
Sun.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting story about the data.
Yeah, thanks.
We have some questions from the audience.
Yeah, please.
I'll go through them as they came in the order they came in.
Okay.
What is the advantage by carrying out a wash trading?
So we show here is that the advantage seems to be here is that, so what we show here is that here, maybe I went very fast here, is that you can see here 0, 5, 10, right? So it's days, okay? So every dot is a day. So you can see like, okay, if I conduct today, if the exchange conducts some wash trading, what is going to be the next day, the fee that I collect? And you can see there's a significant increase in the fee that I collect. So according to our evidence, what seems to be an advantage of doing wash trading is that, because this is just fake trading, right? You can just artificially create fake trading records. And so we think that, well, people look at the exchange, wow, there seems to be a lot of active trading activities going on in the exchange. So the liquidity is good. Maybe this is a time for me to do some trades. so then more people will be attracted to the exchange and they do more transactions. And because every transaction sends some commission, some fees to the exchange. So the exchange can basically just use this technique to increase the fee that are collected. So this is our story.
Interesting. The second question is, there may be some wash trading that are rather hard to discover, just like in the real life. Is there any way we can review them?
Well, yeah, it is difficult to discover, right? Because so we can discover this type of wash trading because we have this advantage of a hacker, right, going into the internal server. And if you are just a market participant, right? So, I mean, just look at all the exchanges now. If you go to Coinbase, you go to Binance, right? Like you can see, okay, there's a trade. You don't know who's trading that, right? If there are actually like at the very beginning, right? Some of the allegations, they argue that some of the contemporaneous exchanges are also engaged in wash trading, right? And as a market participant, there's no way you can tell for sure. You may be able to use some statistical inference, right? You can see, well, if the exchange has very high volume, then whenever I send a large order, the price impact should be relatively small. But if the price impact tends to be quite large, then maybe the exchange is faking volume. But you also don't really know whether the fake volume is really coming from the exchange itself doing wash trading or not. And so that's why I think there's one contribution of our paper is that we provide a very direct and clean evidence, just like there's no way you can deny. Here, just voila, it's just right in front of your eyes.
Great. Another question, can we formulate a Bitcoin wash trading as a rather complicated game theory problem so that we may better understand why such phenomena happens?
I think we can. It's not pursued in the paper, but we can say that our empirical design is sort of guided by this idea, right? So because basically you want to understand what we want to understand. Where is it? What's going on? So you basically what we want to understand is that, I just want to go to that slide. Yeah, here it is. Yes, right. So we want to look at the joint dynamics between wash trading, Bitcoin price, and fee collected, because we think all these variables are kind of interconnected, right? So wash trading, if I understand the question correctly, right, there's this. So in terms of like, I'm not writing a game theory model here, but I'm trying to formulate, right? It's like, first of all, we need to understand, okay, who are the players? There are the exchange insiders, and there's other players, right? And what actions they can do? They can decide on, okay, how much regular trades do I do, and how much wash trade do I do, right? And you also need to expect that it's actually going to be a dynamic game, because, right, I think if I do wash trading now, and you can observe a trade, but you cannot really observe whether it's a wash trade or it's a genuine trade, then you're going to make some inference, and that's going to affect your optimal behavior, and your optimal behavior is in turn is going to feed back into, okay, what is my optimal wash trading decisions. So when we do our empirical specification here, right, we do not like closely follow some game theory, but we kind of think that, well, we kind of follow a little bit up on this philosophy, because we think that, well, the wash trading today, tomorrow, yesterday, the Bitcoin price and the return and the fees collected by the exchange should be somehow interconnected, right? Especially, for example, maybe if exchange see, oh, maybe people are not trading a lot, the trading volume seems to be low, then then maybe I should do some wash trading to just boost up the trading volumes to attract more people to do wash trading. But also maybe I think that I don't want to do wash trade too often, because if I always do wash trade, then maybe just the effect is not going to be there, right? It's like a penicillin, that people get immunity, so that it's no longer effective. So you only want to use it when it's most effective. So that's why instead of just doing a regular regression, we have this vector autoregression because we can actually capture the complicated join dynamics among all these variables without imposing any particular model structure. I don't know whether that answered the question or not, but if not, I'm happy to follow.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I have a question of my own in terms of when you defined wash trade, whether it is the narrow definition or the broad definition, you are counting, there is a pair of buy and sell behavior.
Right.
Wouldn't you consider the frequency of such a behavior or the amount involved before saying that's a wash trade? Otherwise, would a single pair of buy and sell already count as wash trade?
Well, so there are a couple of things that need to enter into this first of the definition here. So if we look at just the direct, definition, here it is, right? So you need to have a transaction. So actually, the data. So that I didn't go to the detail about how the data are recorded. So in the data, each trade is actually counted as two entries. Right, so because every transaction there's a buy side and there's a sell side, right? So that there's actually going to be two entries. One is going to be the buy and one is going to be the sell. But actually, there just is one transaction. So we need to look at all the transaction records, and then they need to have happened at the same time. They need to happen at the same price and need to have the same size. So basically, just to tell that they are the same trade. And then also we want this buyer and the seller to have identical trader IDs. Because if you think about a typical non-wash trade, right? You will still have two records of same time, same price, and same size, but the trader IDs involved will be different. Right? So if the trader IDs involved are the same, then we will call them a wash trade. And in terms, I think you mentioned whether it's a frequency or it's a volume. So we can actually do both, right? So we can just look at the counts. Okay, what's the number of transactions, wash trade transactions, versus what is the kind of Bitcoin volume. We can even do like fiat volume, right? Multiply by the price of Bitcoin. So eventually, in our analysis, later in our VR analysis, what enters into our results are always going to be this so-called Bitcoin volume. We can do other measures too. It's kind of going to be robust to it, but we just present one version of it, in which everything is in units of Bitcoin. So that
related to your sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, sir. No, I'm just saying that this basically just means that if we see a large wash trade, then it's going to just be counted a bit more.
Related to what you said about the exchange would benefit from boosting their popularity and collecting more fees from other transactions. If it's for that purpose, it seems frequency matters more and the amount that matter less.
I don't really a priori have a theory about which one would matter more because it really depends on what traders really look at. I think where you're coming from is like, okay, if you see that, just like if you are on the exchange and you see just the screen just keeps flashing because there seems to be a lot of transactions, that looks just very attractive. We can also expect that maybe people, they look at the volume data and you say, well, the volume is really high. So maybe it just means that, okay, a lot of people are interested in trading today, the liquidity is good. I think I don't have a good theory to say which one will matter more. I think probably the best answer would say like both matters. And we probably should just look at both.
Yeah, makes sense. I was just wondering whether there is some way to combine them to measure the effect.
I don't think we need to combine them. I think we can just present all our results using different definitions, right? We can present one version of it just using transaction counts and use another version which is based on Bitcoin volume.
Okay. Yeah, I think we are heading towards the end. Maybe I'll sneak in one or two questions very quickly. Those are from the audience. Is there any existing policies to prevent wash trading?
I don't know about international evidence, but I think in the United States, there are some. I don't think there's a direct policies like saying, okay, you're banning wash trading in the exchange, and that's kind of like I think some of the debate that we were having, right? So that was back in 2019 when Kraken and New York Attorney General, right, you're debating about what is the most appropriate way of regulating the cryptocurrency exchanges. But we do know that nowadays cryptocurrency exchanges, just the KYC requirement is more stringent. So I cannot see that you can operate an exchange in the at least in the United States. Probably that's true across all countries. That you can just trade Bitcoin with a big volume without actually identifying who you are. You actually have to have your ID, real IDs, right? Your social security numbers or type of that information for others to know, okay, who you are. And once that is implemented, I think the wash trading will be a lot more difficult, right? Because now we know you cannot just open 2 accounts in. But on the other hand, if the exchange itself wants to do wash trading, then I don't think there's anything that can prevent this from happening. Right? Unless the regulators step in and say, well,
the insiders,
I need to audit you, but I don't think this is happening now. Maybe it will happen sometime. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thanks again. This is really interesting results.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to share this. This is still a very new paper, and you can see there's still a lot more that we can do. But I'm happy to share like just kind of existing studies what we find. And if you are interested in any updates of the paper, we have the paper online on SSR, and then you can find the latest updates of this paper.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.